Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with Spending Time, the aBlogtoWatch podcast. I'm joined once again by David Bredan. Hey David.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
So today the topic is one watch, just one watch, the Patek Philippe reference 5520P, aka the alarm travel time. This is a new, pretty mega complicated watch from Patek Philippe that was introduced at Basel World 2019. We had a chance to play with the watch. We have not yet, as of the recording of this show, published our hands-on piece because we're actually still talking about it. And the topic of this show is not just the watch itself, but sort of a point counterpoint. David has some very strong opinions one direction about this watch. I have opinions in another direction. I think we both agree that technically it's an interesting piece. David, I don't think you were there actually during the the PowerPoint presentation at Patek Philippe where they were talking about the new movement that they created for this watch. Let's just, before we sort of go into that, 574 parts, the caliber AL 30-660 SC FUS. 574
Mm,
parts, crazy movement. Let's just talk about that. As a watch nerd aficionado, are you at least impressed by what Patek Philippe is able to do here in this movement?
of course, everyone has got to be, yeah. Not conceptually, but technically, yes.
Let's just sort of go over what this watch does, and I think that's sort of important because if you just look at this watch, it's difficult to determine exactly what's going on here. It's got, and you were not super happy about this, it's got four crowns that
Yep.
each do a variety of things. Alarm travel time. So what this watch essentially is the two time zone watch that has the date that also includes an alarm. But it's not just any alarm. When the alarm ends or when the time that you set on the alarm is activated, rather than an annoying buzzing noise, which is what you get with most mechanical alarms, you get a pretty nice, attractive sounding, and quite loud for a platinum case watch, series of chimes that go on for something like 35 seconds. And
hmm
I was really impressed because I've been thinking about this for a while. I'm not sure if Patek Philippe was the first to do this, but the idea is that an alarm is a very useful complication, but as executed in most luxury watches, given the noise and just sort of given how it works, doesn't feel very luxurious. It feels kind of crude. And Patek Philippe wanted to have an alarm that fit within the luxury world. And I thought that they did a good job at that. What do you think about that element of the watch?
Um, the over implementation, I guess, is fine, and I like the clean dial layout, which is also very cool. Um, yeah, I'm really torn. I'm on the fence about this watch very much so. So what is it that you find so impressive about it? What is it that makes you love this concept so much?
Well, I'm not going to repeat all the things that Patek Philippe said to us during the technical part of the presentation. There are some things in the movement of how they were able to make certain things work that I think were very impressive. And from an auditory standpoint, this is impressive. It's not a minute repeater, but it uses the same system of hammers and gongs, and the gongs are connected directly to the case actually, not the movement, but directly to the case, which helps with the sound. But it's an automatic movement, so it's convenient. And I sort of tend to be annoyed at watches that are very complicated but also not convenient. I also really like the execution of how to set the alarm. And setting the alarm is something which has been done different ways in watches, and Patek Philippe chose a method of setting the alarm which is actually not the most precise, but is actually very, very fun to set. And if you look under 12 o'clock, there's two windows there, and you basically set the time digitally for the alarm in 15-minute segments. So you have one disc which is for the hours and another disc which is for the 15-minute segments, and then underneath it is a small AM/PM indicator. So you set the time to the nearest 15 minutes for the alarm. And yes, you can't do to the nearest minute, but by being able to set to the nearest 15 minutes, you have this very small and attractive digital way of setting the alarm time, which I like a lot. So if you actually look on here, there's three different AM/PM indicators. There's for the alarm, there's for the home time, and there's for the local time. And I think that it was very attractive that the way they were able to integrate those three pieces of information that could have very easily been confusing.
Yeah, I like the symmetrical dial layout a lot. That is a nice touch for sure.
So the style of this watch comes from, I actually forget the reference, but it was the gold pilot watch that they came out with a few years ago. Then they came out with a three-hand version of it, and that was quite controversial. What was the name of that original watch? I'm trying to remember.
Ah, boy. Hold on, let me find it really fast. I think I can find it. It was the 5524. That's what it was.
The 5524.
Yep, with the three crowns. Yeah.
There we go.
Yes, definitely the 5524.
Okay, so the 5524. Was this 2000? Was this 18? I guess it came out. Well, I guess we got this after the fact. This is the 2017 watch, maybe 2016 even.
There's also been a three-hand version. Don't forget about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Without the
Yeah,
crowns.
no, yeah, I mentioned that a second ago. So this watch came out, and when this came out, I love this watch because it was the size I wanted to wear, and it was legible. So you can see that the 5520P, which is the alarm travel time, literally builds on the previous 5524. So you already have the travel time part of it. They just added the alarm element to it. And I actually think that the additional crowns, the way that they designed it, actually makes the 5520P a more attractive watch in terms of just the overall visual design because it's more symmetrical, as opposed to the 24 that only has the travel one. Now this watch was like...
I think the exact opposite. Sorry for interrupting. I
No,
think
it's
it looks
okay.
absolutely silly. I think it looks super silly. You know the Joker, of course, very well, and that has two crowns for the two ears of the Joker. And this looks like something with four ears to me. It's that silly. It's that kind of silly.
Well, what
It's
would
nice
you
and
have them do?
symmetrical.
Like, what would you have had them do here? I mean, they're trust me, Patek Philippe doesn't want to add stuff they don't need. So, how would you have had them do
Are you
four
sure?
crowns? Well, I mean, look.
Well, here's the thing. The two crowns are not really crowns on the left-hand side. They are pushers, plus and minus to adjust. So if the four things didn't look exactly the same, since they have totally different functions, I think that would make sense. The two pushers on the left-hand side of the case, I think, should be something different. That would make it more asymmetrical, which would hurt the design overall somehow, but it would make it look less silly, I think.
I mean, look. It does look like something that has two sets of ears. Um, I'm I'm okay with it because I think they try to do something as symmetrical as possible. But obviously, it's rubbing you the wrong way, and that's okay. I think what's interesting is to take a design like this, which has proven controversial for Patek, which is fine. It's a brand that needs a little bit more controversy, but it has proven controversial. And a lot of the watches that traditionalists love from the brand, I actually am not that keen on. But then again, I'll like something like this. Do you think that there's something to that? That like if you don't like a lot of the traditional Patek stuff and you like this, that makes sense? Or is this just a watch that even if you don't like traditional Patek stuff, you still think that there's issues with this?
I think there are objectively issues with this. It's not it's not impacted by what other kind of stuff I like from Patek. If this had Zenith on it, I would still say it looked silly. So you were saying it was legible and it was a nice size for the 5524, the three crown thing. And yeah, but do you really need to go Patek to get something like this? You don't. So what is the added value here? In this alarm, I see that it's very complicated. It's very nicely done. Hundreds of components finished to the Patek level, especially for their high-end stuff, which is always nice. So the quality is going to be there, and you get a lot of components in a nice new complication or complicated movement from Patek. And there's a novelty factor to it, but the packaging is where it all goes horribly wrong for me.
So okay, so both of us, when we look at this dial, this is sort of a pilot style dial, if you will. We see similar, not identical, but similar hour markers, similar hands, a similar case out there. From an originality standpoint, we look at this and neither of us are wowed. I mean, I think we can both agree that none of us look at this and be like, wow, Patek's doing something different. Forget the movement. Just sort of an overall glance, takeaway impression.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It doesn't feel like Patek Philippe is inventing anything new. If anything, the subsidiary dial for the date, in a sense, looks a little bit out of place. Like for me, it looks a little bit dressier than the rest of this thing. It does. It's not wrong or anything like that, but it feels a little bit out of place. And that's something which I think people can have a difference of opinion on in terms of exactly how they want to go about evaluating it. But I go back to this idea of how refined it is given all the things that Patek Philippe had to build into this. I mean, look at under 12 o'clock. There's a small bell, and that's a
Yep.
small indicator of whether or not the alarm is turned on or off. I mean, all these
Yep.
little things need to be in there. But we've seen how it's executed on other watches where there's been like a little hand that goes up and down to on or off. And I think the use of windows makes this very clean. I mean, if you look at this compared to the one which is just the travel time and not the alarm, other than a couple of little holes on the dial and this digital implementation of the alarm time, there's not really much added there. So there's very few brands that have this sort of exercise in refinement and taking things away like Patek Philippe does. I don't see that. I see another brand doing this. Maybe they could have got the movement done right, but I think they would have made the execution too complicated. If anything, there's a value in the restraint because we see complicated watches like this from other brands, but very few of us can imagine wearing them on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and Patek Philippe does deserve praise for that. I mean, if you recall, for example, a really close watch to this is the Zenith Double-Matic, and that had a bunch of hands and weird apertures, and it had actually three, well, not crowns, but three crown-like things, and then two extra pushers for the chrono. So that was an almost equally complicated watch that had, I believe, an alarm, and it also had a bunch of, a GMT and a chronograph. This is a whole bunch of things, and it looked way messier. It looked like they didn't even care what it was going to look like. They just threw all this stuff on there, and they were like, "Oh, okay, this works now, and this is what we're going with." And as opposed to that, you're absolutely correct in saying that Patek has, done a really great job in making this so clean. And I really like the digital alarm display. That's a nice touch for sure.
I mean, look, I think that a lot can be said about how this fits or doesn't fit into sort of what we want from Patek Philippe. I actually, if you go back and you look at Patek Philippe's history, especially if you go to the museum, I was actually just talking about this over the weekend, you see that they experimented with an enormous amount of design variation. So to say this doesn't look like a Patek Philippe is wrong because this actually looks like some historic Patek Philippe's, no doubt. If you say to yourself, it looks not as high end as it should be as a $200,000 plus watch, I would say you're also correct. But we know for a fact there's a group of people out there who are comfortable with their wealth and want a stealthy, subtle way of expressing that. I mean, this is for me the ultimate stealth wealth watch of Basel World 2019. It's in platinum, but you wouldn't know that from seeing it, 3 feet away. It's incredibly complicated, but you wouldn't necessarily know that from seeing it a few feet away. And the dial, yes, it's complicated, but it just has pretty ordinary, kind of like vintage sport watch style hands and hour markers with lume on it. It just looks like a easy to read watch. So you have to know timepieces pretty well. You have to be pretty sophisticated and experienced to even notice what this thing is from afar.
But And you're correct. Yes, it's a stealth wealth watch for those who don't know anything about watches, and yet it is the ultimate show-off watch for those who want to impress their watch enthusiast peers.
Yes. Yes.
It works the exact opposite way. When I look at it, I think to myself, it's the showiest thing. And if someone wants to show off their wealth and how much money they can burn on, like the new Patek, do you know the new Patek with the 4 crowns? Where this is it. You can notice it from 30 feet away if you know watches. That's the Patek with the 4 weird crowns on it.
But that's the
So
world we live in, man. That's That's how these
Yeah.
watches get sold. There's someone with money who's really excited to show it off to someone else with money.
Yeah, exactly. But this just contradicts, how it's stealthy. It is stealthy for those who don't want to show your wealth to, and then it's super show-offy to, for all of those who know watches.
Right,
So,
and that's
I can
that's what they're
appreciate
going
that.
for. That's what they're going. I mean, look, it's like I want someone else who's in the the same group, the same aficionado circle to know it. But do I want the paparazzi to know it? No. Certain types of people are only going to understand wealth on a watch as a function of precious materials like gold, rose gold, yellow gold, diamonds, other precious stones. That's what they're going to notice. But white gold and platinum, just because it looks so much like stainless steel, just doesn't have that same look at me factor. And we know those people. We've met them. They want that attention by the other watch lovers, but they have no interest in just the normal person knowing that they have money. Probably because these people are just asked for favors and things all the time. If you have money, this is something we've learned, of course, from the watch industry. You're asked to buy stuff constantly. Like, once word is out, like, oh, that's a rich person, oh my God, offers start flying to them constantly. Let me sell you this. Let me do this for you. It must get annoying for these people. They just sometimes want to crawl into a hole. So it's this weird kind of thing where they need to express who they are to the right people, but not in such an overt way that people that are not in their circle that would ask them for things are also tipped off to their status. And that's, again, that's not a problem that I have, but it's a problem that I'm aware of because we've been around it so much.
Yeah, that's a good point. Still, I think, when I was looking at this, and especially when I saw the caseback side of this watch, I was deeply underwhelmed. For $226,810, which is the current.
Deeply underwhelmed.
Deeply underwhelmed, because what I was looking at, as a good alternative for this kind of money is the Ferdinand Berthoud, and we were going to only talk about this Patek, but we did discuss in advance that we would look at a Ferdinand Berthoud just a little bit, just to compare, what is it that you can get for this sort of money.
So let's we're talking about not a watch that competes with a Patek Philippe 5520P on a functional level, but now we're talking about value for the money, because the Patek Philippe, the 5520P-001 in platinum, alarm travel time, costs $226,810. That is a very expensive watch, and for that money, there are alternatives. Let me just say right now, Patek Philippe, very rarely, if ever, is the value leader. So this is something we know for sure, but you are definitely correct that for the same kind of money, you can look at something like a Ferdinand Berthoud. So please, talk to me about your appreciation for Ferdinand Berthoud.
Well, it's way more exclusive, for one. You can get some really special pieces that are sometimes unique pieces, with bronze cases or titanium cases or whatever. And if you approach them and say, hey, this is what I want, chances are they will make it for you, unless it's something, just outrageous and preposterous. So for that reason, I think it's very impressive. It has roughly the same amount of parts. Once you factor in the fusee and chain, then that adds hundreds of parts. But if you don't, what you still get is a fantastic movement that's actually constructed in the same way as old movements were before movement plates were invented. They didn't exist in the way that they exist today. So this movement on the inside has columns that hold up the two plates on the top and the bottom. So it's constructed like that. It has this incredible three-dimensional structure to it. Beautiful flying tourbillon, fusee and chain. Very interesting dials, especially on the new one that they launched this year with a moon phase indication that is unlike anything I've ever seen before. Cool case. And again, if you get this in white gold or titanium or bronze or whatever, no one's going to know it's a $250,000 watch. But once you turn it around, it's way more impressive than the Patek Philippe. It's not even in the same league, as far as I'm concerned. In the Patek, if I look at the case back, all I see is like some nice plates with a tiny little, barely visible anglage. Once you can afford a watch like this, probably your vision up close is not that great, so you cannot even see anything. And then you have one hammer, and it's just like kind of half-assed to me. And then you have the governor, which is the same kind of thing as you get on the minute repeater, which is cool. But if you look at the case back of this watch, the only two things on the Patek that are cool are the governor and the hammer. And then that's it. And everything else, what you're looking at, you can get on a $30,000 Patek. So where is your $200,000 going for a few apertures and an annoying sound, or less annoying sound?
So again, I think that you're discussing something which is incredibly important. But this is one of the frustrations we have, where the inherent value of a watch is something that sometimes is also a function of popularity. So we know that the Ferdinand Berthoud, from an inherent standpoint, is a great watch, but other people to agree need to feel that people like us talk about it a lot. They're able to see it for themselves. Ferdinand Berthoud has enormous qualities which are good, but it's never going to have the name power a Patek Philippe. So a lot of people, and this is their argument to me, and it's difficult to rebut it, is yeah, this is a great watch. I get it. But I just want people to know that I'm well off. And if I ever also need to sell the thing, you know that selling a Patek is a fraction of the work of trying to sell something for an Berthoud. You know that you might lose some money on selling the Patek if you buy it brand new. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll sell it for even more. But you feel safe. Because these days, a lot of people are worried about where their money's going. When you get the Ferdinand Berthoud, you basically have it for life. Now, you don't know how popular the brand will be in 30 years from now, but we know that there's so many nicely finished watches out there that are well made, maybe not quite like this, but are very well made, that there's a high amount of availability. So the saturation in the market for not well known but super nicely made watches is in our favor as consumers, meaning that we're going to get the best deal possible. But Patek, right now, isn't really selling just do people like you and I know about the movement and agree that's awesome. It's selling on a certain type of status. And so, the most entry level rich guy in the company has a 3-hand Patek. And moving up the ladder, people have more and more complicated Pateks. These people might not know anything about the movements, but there's sort of this pecking order internally at an organization about who has the nicer watch. And you have, the travel time. It's like, I'm just going to blow you all out of the water because I have more money than any of you guys. But, I'm a really humble guy. I only want to say it to you guys and no one else. You know what I mean? There's a very nuanced messaging value that an expensive Patek Philippe or anything from a known luxury brand has that a niche thing doesn't have. And you look in the car world, for example, you can have, these stealth wealth cars, for example, that perform super well but aren't that flashy on the outside. There is a degree of people that love them. And it's easy to stand behind them because you like it for the inherent qualities and performance and features that it has. But at the end of the day, like, a Ferrari.
It's not a Ferrari.
Stock out of the factory without anything fancy is going to get you more, envious eyeballs any day of the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and there's this constant balancing act, on who you want to impress, who do you want to know what you have, and who is it, you want to hide it from, and so on. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and you're right. Yeah, I agree on that. And finding the sweet spot in a watch, in your budget, let it be $200,000 or even just $2,000, because for $2,000 you can pick up like an all gold, like a gold case, vintage, Longines or whatever, and everyone's gonna look at it and, oh, that's like a gold Swiss watch for $2,000, or $2,000 you can buy an Oris, and no one's gonna care. So yeah, it's the same thing at every price point. I'm just trying to bring it down to a more relatable aspect of it. I'm looking at right now a Patek Philippe Grand Complication Perpetual Calendar Split Second Chrono, which was the be all and end all of Patek Philippe's for some time. Of course, there were a few others that were super crazy, but this was, I'm looking at it on Golfberg, and it says retail was $306,500, and their price on this obviously pre-owned watch, because it's from a couple of years ago, is $239,500, which means that it's almost exactly $70,000 less than what it retails for. And that's a lot of money to lose on a watch that used to be in the pecking order, really up high in terms of Patek Philippe.
And that's not uncommon, but the question is, what would you lose on the Ferdinand Berthoud? I don't think it would be a little bit more than that percentage off.
Honestly, when there are so few made, and there's like 2-3 years of a waiting list, I wouldn't be that surprised if you could find a collector who has, who would be able to buy it.
I'm going to tell you what, if I had that money and I had to choose between the two watches, after thinking about it carefully, I would probably go for the Ferdinand Berthoud. I probably would, because for me, that's a more interesting product overall. But I think that if you are, but I think there's a massive market for this Patek Philippe. There's probably a bigger market. Now, is there a massive market in terms of the people that can afford it? No. But there's a safety behind it. And remember, you and I know watches in an intimate way that many other people don't. People should value our opinion, but I don't blame them if they haven't reached our level to understand where we're coming from when we form those opinions. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. Sure.
Like if somebody comes to you, it's just like, David, I have the money for this. I'm trying to decide between watches. What do you think about this Patek Philippe, this 5520P? Is this a good buy? Like, you're not going to say to them, no, careful, careful, this thing might be a piece of crap. Like, you're not going to say that. You know that there's enough built-in assurances behind the name, behind the fact that the brand will want to make sure their watches work. I mean, look, Patek Philippe is a company, and say what you will about it, but if they give you a watch that doesn't work, especially a complicated one, do you have any doubt in your mind that they're going to take it back and fix it? I'm pretty sure they will.
Yeah. Well, they better.
They better. But there's other brands we know that have watches in this price point who might play a bunch of games or might not
Yeah.
put the time and effort into the engineering for their exotic watches to work properly. Now, this is a serious concern and something we haven't mentioned but too many times because, most of the time we're not making realistic considerations of buying $100,000 plus watches. But this is a very important scenario for people to consider. You want to buy an exotic, complicated watch, and I would consider the 5520P to be an exotic, complicated watch. Anything over 400 parts is definitely going to be exotic and complicated. This is over 500. So you get the watch, and it's supposed to do all kinds of stuff. It's supposed to have this alarm and travel time, blah blah blah. That you're going to be playing with it all the time, and you want it to work. You don't want it to be like off by 10 minutes a day. So Patek Philippe knows that as well. Patek also knows that a lot of these watches like stay in the shrink wrap and never go out. That's a true thing. But enough people play with it. So Patek Philippe, because of their reputation, they put the time and the effort to engineer these properly. As I have confidence that before they release a product, they test it, they make sure it works, they make sure it doesn't suck, because that's going to destroy enthusiasm. Forget value proposition. I have faith that Patek Philippe is going to quality control this movement and its operation enough. But we know that with other brands, and some of them are big brands like Patek as well, will not necessarily do that. And the smaller brands definitely can't. Because if you're making just 20 watches, for example, and you're a small company, and you know that movement is new and exotic, are you really going to have the resources to go through research and development to quality control it, to see where the weak points in the movement are, to re-engineer parts? No, you're gonna as long as it sort of works, you know that you can fix them on an incoming basis, and that'll cost you less than having to re-engineer from the ground up. So if you just want a watch that'll work and don't want a lot of headaches, there's something to be said about going to a company that's as established as Patek Philippe, because it's not worth the reduction in their overall brand equity and their reputation to sell a defective product. Whereas other smaller companies, they might be more inclined to be okay with selling a defective product because they've gone through cost-benefit analysis that said to them, you know what, it's going to end up costing us less in the long run to just fix the broken ones than to have something that works properly to begin with. And if Patek Philippe did something like that, it would be scandalous. It would be scandalous. It would cost them years to get over it. So,
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So, again, design, not design, I think there's a reliability that if you're buying an exotic, complicated watch, you need to think about, because you don't want something that has to be repaired a lot, and worse off, you don't want something which is fundamentally flawed from the engineering perspective.
Yeah, there's this pressure on Patek for sure, and I can appreciate if they can actually overcome that pressure. So that's a good thing. It's true. I've not really heard that many, or any for that matter, true horror stories about Patek not, standing behind this product. That's actually true. I have to give them that. It doesn't make me like the 5520P any more than I do. But yeah, that's a fair consideration. I agree.
The design has a boring element to it. That's every Patek Philippe watch that I've ever seen. On some days, to me, looks great. On other days, it's like it's a great sleeping pill. There's nothing that's per se exciting about this. This watch is a wrist companion. You wear it. It doesn't wear you. There are some exceptions. The Grandmaster Chime that
nobody can wear that watch.
I mean that is a watch that has a lot of personality. We'll say that is a watch that speaks louder than the wearer. But that's a rare watch. So it's good. This is it right here. This is the newer version of it with the blue dial. But that's the type of watch that you wear when the watch gets more attention than the wearer. But the travel time allows the wearer to be front and center. And it's also, look, it's conservative. Patek Philippe is a conservative brand. They have some non-conservative watches for sure, and a lot of the watches they have that are diamonds and da-da-da-da-da, they don't publicize those as much, but there's plenty of those. But in the scheme of like design things, this watch is almost non-designed. It's a timepiece first. It's, I guess a travel tool somewhere else, but there's no like design element here. Like they're not trying to be original. They're not trying to break any territory there in any way, shape, or form. Like Patek Philippe is not trying to break new ground on design-wise. And I think you and I, we want to see more of that, especially from brands like Patek Philippe that can do it successfully. And we're a little disappointed when sometimes they're like, okay, it's great what's inside, but does it have to be so boring on the outside again? And sometimes the
On
answer
both
is
the
yes.
front and back. Yeah.
You,
Yeah,
you,
the case back is it's boring too.
look,
But
it's
yeah, and here's the
stealth.
thing. It's kind of boring, and then it's stupid as well, in my eyes at least. Other everyone's entitled and free to disagree with me. But if I look at it, I just think it's a stupid looking watch. It's just so dumb. I can't force myself to think hard enough of the movement and its complexity to disregard how incomprehensibly dumb this watch looks to me. It's just I keep looking at it and I'm like, this is so weird. I cannot make myself get over it.
Did you
Maybe
remember
I will.
what about the little diamond here? You see, kind of under 6 o'clock at the case. There's a
Ugh,
little diamond. Oh yeah,
oh my God.
the secret
That's the
message to the wearer. By the way, just so you remember, you spent a lot of money on this watch.
the secret
That
message. They could
that's
send
what
me
it
my bank
is.
account,
But
my
but
bank
but
account balance every hour.
again, you can get angry at it. You can not like it. You can say to yourself, if I had that
I just roll
220.
my eyes. I'm not angry. I'm just rolling my eyes so hard I'm gonna fall off my chair. That's all I'm doing. But I'm not angry.
And you and I like doing that, and I think that's why this makes for a very interesting counterpoint. The watch we've been talking about is the Patek Philippe 5520P
Hmm.
001 alarm travel time. It's new for 2019. I like it a lot. David has reservations about it, and
Yep.
it's a very interesting timepiece to discuss when we're going over watches that cost, once again, $226,810 USD. You can see more about this watch on aBlogtoWatch. David, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Spending Time.
Thank you, and thanks so much for listening, you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.